Public housing is more than just an apartment complex. Public housing is more than the lines and lines of condos you see spread out between 3 to 5 streets within the city of Boston. Public housing is a lifestyle. It is a system that has been unchanged and uncared for the last 3 to 4 decades. According to United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, public housing units were created to promote a decent and safe household for low-income families, the elderly, and persons with disabilities to get adequate housing from. However, as someone who has lived in public housing for at least 17 of the 19 years of her life, I know for a fact that this image of decency and safety has not always been proven true. Although there have been some developments taken by this department to fix some of the horrible living conditions these families face, there needs to be more change done. More importantly, there are assumptions from middle and upper class citizens and families who think that the people who live in housing projects and developments only live there so they can get away with taking advantage of welfare, or that they think that these families are just going to be the dirt of America, that they are only ever going to be able to work low-paying jobs because they are lazy, not because of the fact that they do not have access to the same opportunities as a upper-class white man. They ignore the impacts income inequality has, they ignore the residential segregation, and most importantly, they ignore the main problems that public housing has. And I want to let you know that there are 3 things that need to be developed and changed within the public housing world. First, it is the quality of housing. The quality of housing has a direct impact on every family's life. More importantly, the health aspect. If you are living in a household where you can get cancer or asthma from just living in a space, you are being forced to live with an illness that you cannot pay for just because someone was too lazy to do a health inspection on your house. And the fact that there have been many health impact assessments done within these communities and that there are very little changes done just proves that the entire system needs to change. And that leads me to the second point, affordability. These people are essentially living in public housing that is supposed to be decent and safe and affordable for their families, but they're still being charged maybe like a $1,700 rent bill that every 2 to 3 years the rent keeps going up because of the fact that the department or the development is creating something wonderful for the families who live there. Maybe a basketball court, maybe a park. But those things are not necessarily needed when the quality of the housing needs to change. Most of the families who live there, they already come from low incomes. Like their median annual earnings are different based on the race they come from. For example, Hispanic women make around $29,000 annual earnings per year, as Hispanic men make $32,000 annual earnings per year. And African American women make maybe $34,000 a year, as African American men make $38,000 a year. And those are just average earnings. Some families, they do not make nearly as much. And a lot of the time, these families already live in residentially segregated neighborhoods. In fact, about 28% of low-income families live in a majority low-income neighborhood, which immediately leads to the fact that their schools are not going to be as good, that they will not be able to push themselves out of poverty to put their families and themselves in a better place, just because the fact that their housing does not make a good enough property tax for them to buy better schools and to buy a better education. And sometimes, even if they have better educations by being in a program that pushes them out to suburban schools, sometimes they don't have the money to take an SAT test. Sometimes they don't have access to the programs who pay for free school lunches, who pay for them to take a free ACT test. And that is disappointing, in my opinion, that the public housing only serves for one purpose, just to give them a random place for them to live, but without any actual resources that are needed to help them get to a better place in their life. Sometimes the location is what causes people to believe that your family is lazy, that you are just going to take advantage of welfare, when it's obvious that is not the case. And aside from these 3 points, I just think that we need to get more health impact assessments done within these public housing communities for the U.S. government to fully understand the impact they are having on all of these American families. They need to understand that when they do not renovate, or when they do not give affordable housing, or when they do not put housing in good locations, they are causing 1.2 million American families to always depend on that system, and to always believe that they are not going to be successful, that they are never going to lift themselves out of poverty. It's gotten to the point where it's like, I've lived in these housing complexes for maybe 17 years and there's still not been change done. And I just think that more and more people need to open their eyes and realize that when you're stuck in a public housing complex and that there are people all around you telling you that you are nothing, that you are not going to be able to get out of this small apartment, you are basically forcing 1.2 million families to believe that they are meant to stay in public housing and that they are alone, that they have to do so much work just to make their public housing better. And although self-advocacy is important, I think it's time that the city of Boston takes their public housing communities into consideration when they're making big decisions. And more importantly, the United States government needs to understand that they can't turn a blind eye to public housing.